The shooting range hummed with the sharp snap of gunfire, a gritty symphony of powder and steel, but in lane 8, furthest from the clamor of boasts and Bluetooth speakers, a solitary figure carved out a space of stillness. He wore a faded plaid shirt, its beige check softened by years of wear, paired with denim jeans that bore the faint creases of countless days in the sun. A plain gray cap, its brim curled just enough to shade his weathered eyes, sat low on his brow, unadorned by logos or slogans. His stance was a relic of another era, shoulders squared, feet planted, grip unwavering, each shot from his .45 pistol striking the target with a precision that seemed almost mechanical, yet deeply human. The younger shooters, a mix of off-duty recruits and weekend enthusiasts, dismissed him as a retired mechanic or delivery driver, burning through ammo to pass the time. They swapped bets and jabs, their laughter cutting through the haze of gunpowder, oblivious to the man whose every movement carried the weight of battles long past. But a Navy SEAL trainee, pausing to reload his own weapon, caught a glimpse of the ink on the man's forearm, a faint, sun-bleached mark that halted him mid-motion. It wasn't a flashy tattoo, no eagle or skull, but a simple number and insignia, the kind you didn't buy in a parlor, you earned it through sweat, blood, and silence. When the trainee mustered the courage to ask about his service, the range fell into a hush, the man's reply, a single word and a vague nod to a distant era, landing like a stone in still water, rippling through the crowd until every smirk faded. Welcome to the stories of the unseen, where valor speaks in whispers. Share in the comments where you're reading from today, and if you believe these tales deserve to live on, hit subscribe to keep them breathing. The range opened its gates at dawn, but he was there by 6:40, a lone figure in the gravel lot, his pickup truck parked at the far end, its faded red paint chipped from years of desert sun. He signed the log with a slow, deliberate script, Ellis. No rank, no pleasantries, just a curt nod to the clerk, a grizzled man who barely looked up from his coffee. With measured steps, he crossed the concrete floor to lane 8, his scuffed but polished boots tapping softly, a rhythm as steady as his heartbeat. His outfit was unchanging, jeans worn thin at the knees, a plaid shirt rolled to the elbows, and that cap, once navy, now a ghostly gray from years of sweat and dust. His range bag, a simple canvas sack, hung low in his right hand, holding only what he needed, a battered pistol case, a single box of .45s, and a dented thermos that never left his bench, its silver surface scratched with stories he'd never tell. The regulars, a mix of hunters and tactical hobbyists, called him Gramps or the quiet guy, chuckling at his routine, one target, 30 shots, then gone. They mocked how he never lingered, never joined their debates over calibers or optics. But the range staff saw something else, the way he scanned the horizon with a predator's calm, his eyes lingering not on the paper silhouette 25 yards out but on the steel plate behind it, as if reading currents in the air no one else felt. He never flinched at the crack of a rifle, never missed a shot, never bothered with his spent brass, leaving it scattered like forgotten coins. That morning, the range buzzed with extra energy. A group of Navy recruits, fresh from basic and brimming with bravado, had rolled in, their duffels slung over shoulders, their banter loud enough to drown out the pop of handguns. One, a lean SEAL hopeful named Kyle, set up in lane 5, his gear bag sporting a Trident sticker that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. At 22, he was sharp, driven, with an instinct for spotting the real thing amid the noise. At first, he barely noticed the old man 3 lanes over, just another shooter in the lineup, his .45 steady report blending with the chaos. But then Kyle caught the rhythm, not loud, not flashy, but relentless. 3 shots, pause, 2 shots, pause, each cluster on the target tight as a coin. He glanced sideways. The man's form was textbook, his hands commanding the pistol with a quiet authority, no wasted motion, no show. As Ellis reloaded, Kyle saw it, a tattoo, faded to a ghostly outline, just a number and an insignia, unmistakable to anyone who'd studied the lore of special ops. It was First Recon ink, from a time when tattoos were scars of duty, not fashion. Kyle waited, watching the man's target grow denser with perfect holes, then stepped closer during a lull. "Sir, that's First Recon, isn't it?" Ellis didn't turn, just fired his final round, a bullseye, and set the pistol down with deliberate care before meeting Kyle's gaze. "Once," he said, his voice low, like gravel underfoot. That single word hit like a gavel, closing a door Kyle hadn't realized he'd opened. He nodded, returned to his lane, but his shots lost their rhythm, his mind replaying the moment. Ellis moved with purpose, no haste, no flair. Each reload was a ritual, magazine in, slide checked, fire, his target a map of precision. The other recruits, joking about their groupings and betting on lunch, didn't notice, but Kyle's friend, a wiry kid named Tanner, nudged him. "What's up with the old dude? He's consistent, I'll give him that." Kyle stayed silent, his eyes fixed on Ellis, who cleaned his pistol with a worn cloth, unhurried, as if the world could wait. The range's clamor seemed to fade around lane 8, the air growing heavy with unspoken weight. Kyle approached again, voice softer now. "Sir, when did you serve?" Ellis paused, the slide of his .45 locked open, and looked at him, not irritated, just calm. "Mid-60s to mid-70s. Recon, Southeast Asia." Kyle's throat tightened. That pinned the tattoo to Marine First Recon, covert ops, missions that vanished into classified vaults, jungles, rivers, and silence. "Laos?" Kyle ventured, his voice barely above a whisper. Ellis gave a faint nod. "Among other places." The words landed like stones, and the ranges didn't seem to shrink, the recruits' laughter softening as they caught Kyle's shift in demeanor. A few glanced over, sensing something had changed. "Ever train with SEALs?" Kyle asked, a grin tugging at his lips, hoping to lighten the moment. Ellis's eyes crinkled, the ghost of a smile. "Back then, we all did a bit of everything. You moved, you survived, or you didn't." Kyle chuckled, but his next question was bolder, fueled by stories he'd heard in training. "Sir, my CO told us about a jungle op, early 70s, a recon team leader who carried 2 wounded men out under fire. Classified for years." "Was that?" Ellis didn't blink. "Lots of things were classified," he said, his tone a wall, not harsh, just final, a reminder that some stories weren't told, they were carried, like scars beneath a sleeve. He stood, stretched his stiff back, the faint creak of his joints audible in the quiet, and zipped his range bag. Kyle stepped aside, and other shooters looked over, their curiosity piqued by the SEAL trainee's reverence. As Ellis turned to leave, Kyle snapped to attention, no jest, just instinct. "Sir, thank you for your service." "Truly." Ellis paused mid-step, studied him for a long moment, then reached into his pocket and pressed something into Kyle's palm, a heavy, worn coin, its first recon emblem etched deep, the word endure carved on the reverse. "You'll know when to go quiet," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Till then, earn it." Then he walked off, bag in hand, thermos tucked under his arm, his silhouette dissolving into the morning sun like a specter fading into mist. Kyle stood rooted, the coin's weight anchoring him to the moment. He'd seen posers, men flaunting unearned patches or spinning tall tales at bars. This was different. The coin wasn't a souvenir, it was a relic of a shadow war, forged in places where names didn't survive. "Kyle, you good?" Tanner called from a few lanes over, his voice cutting through the haze. Kyle didn't answer, just walked over and opened his palm, showing the coin. The group crowded around, expecting a quip, but the emblem's gravity silenced them. "That's First Recon, Vietnam era," Tanner whispered, his usual smirk gone. "No way." Kyle nodded. "It's real." He approached the clerk, a lanky guy scrolling his phone, coffee mug steaming beside him. "You know this man?" The clerk squinted, wiping his glasses. "Lane 8? Signs as Ellis. Pays cash, no card, no email. Been coming for years, never chats." Kyle leaned in. "First name?" The clerk tapped his keyboard. "T. Ellis." File says, no recognition for events or honors. Odd, right? Kyle didn't smile. He ever say anything? The clerk shrugged. Once, when I thanked him for serving, he looked me dead in the eye and said, I didn't do it for your thanks. I didn't push it. Kyle nodded, his gaze dropping to the coin. Without a word, he stepped outside, the morning air sharp with the scent of sage and dust. That night, sleep eluded him. Past midnight, he fired up his laptop, diving into declassified archives, sifting through redacted reports and fragmented logs. Hours later, he found it, buried in a MACVSOG file from the early 70s, Sergeant T. Ellis, 1st Recon, Laos, extraction under fire, saved 7, wounded twice, declined honors, asset irreplaceable, now silent. The word silent struck like a blade. That was the creed of those missions, no memoirs, no parades, just duty carried in solitude. Ellis had borne it through decades, from jungle shadows to a plastic bench at a Nevada range, his plaid shirt hiding a history no one bothered to read. But now Kyle knew, and the knowledge burned like a signal flare. The next week, Ellis returned, same truck, same routine, his boots crunching gravel as he crossed the lot. But the range felt different. Kyle and 3 teammates, Tanner, a stocky recruit named Ruiz, and a wiry sharpshooter called Lena, had arrived before dawn, waiting near the back benches. They didn't speak as Ellis passed, just offered subtle nods, their posture straighter, their eyes tracking him with the respect reserved for legends. The range was quieter, the usual swagger muted, as if the air itself had taken note. Shooters loaded magazines with care, cleared lanes with precision, their voices low. Halfway through his second string, Kyle approached, holding a sealed box of .45s. Figured 30 wasn't enough today, sir, he said, his tone steady. Ellis looked at the box, then at Kyle, and gave a slow nod, accepting it without a word. He reloaded, fired, the rhythm unbroken, each shot a lesson in control. Later, as the scent of gunpowder thinned and the sun climbed higher, Ellis sat on the bench, sipping from his thermos, its metallic tang mixing with the desert air. One by one, the recruits passed, not as a group, but individually, offering nods, handshakes, a quiet, sir. Tanner lingered, his usual bravado replaced by something softer. We looked you up, sir. You saved a lot of men. Ellis wiped the thermos with his sleeve. They saved each other, he said, his voice a low rumble. Tanner nodded, swallowing his reply, and walked away. Ruiz, whose father had served in Desert Storm, paused next. My dad said guys like you didn't talk because the job wasn't done. That true? Ellis tilted his head, eyes distant. Job's never done. You just carry it different. Ruiz nodded, his jaw tight, and moved on. Lena, the last, stood quietly, her rifle slung over her shoulder. Sir, my brother's deploying soon. Any advice? Ellis met her gaze, his eyes softening. Tell him to listen to the quiet. It'll keep him sharp. She nodded, her lips pressed tight, and rejoined her team. Kyle sat beside him, both staring downrange at the heat shimmering over the targets. Silence stretched between them, comfortable, heavy. Finally, Kyle spoke. You ever think about teaching? Ellis exhaled, a faint sound like wind over sand. Tried forgetting what I'd teach. But some things stick, and some folks need to learn. Kyle pressed, his voice earnest. That's why I'm listening. Ellis turned, his gaze sharp but not unkind. Then listen more, talk less. They shared a quiet chuckle, the sound swallowed by the range's hum. Before leaving, Ellis set the ammo box on the bench, unopened, a gesture louder than words. Days later, a small brass plate appeared above Lane 8, no bigger than a matchbox, screwed into the wood, reserved for T. Ellis, until he says otherwise. No one claimed credit, and Ellis never mentioned it, never asked for it to be removed. Some men teach with lectures, Ellis taught with presence. His 30 shots spoke louder than any speech, proving valor needs no spotlight, just a soul wise enough to see it. He didn't need applause or biographies. All he needed was one recruit who looked beyond the plaid and asked the right question. And from that moment, every round he fired carried a lesson no manual could teach. Have you known someone like Ellis, a veteran who carried history in silence, unnoticed until a spark revealed their truth? Share their name, their story, in the comments. Let the world know who they were before the quiet took hold. Because at the heart of every shot fired here, there's a human story waiting to be heard.